Let's talk about Rogue One. Hey everybody, Matt Cobley here. I'm on vacation, working on my Stronghold rules, seeing a couple of movies, so we may spend more time over the next couple of videos talking about movies. I want to do a video about Dune because Legendary now has the rights to make Dune movies or TV shows. We've got a new Blade Runner trailer, and Blade Runner was a huge part of my life growing up, and I want to do a video on that. We got a new Alien trailer, and I loved Prometheus. I was one of the few people that was ready for a really interesting science fiction movie from Ridley Scott. So when that's what I got, I was happy. And I think people wanted what this trailer just showed us, which is a kind of new horror movie from Ridley Scott, which I feel like we've already seen one of. Why go back to that? Well, also, La La Land opens in a couple days, getting huge buzz. I'm probably going to go see that. I have a sort of an expectation that a movie like La La Land will win the Best Picture Oscar because it is a movie from a hot director that is about Hollywood and movies. And that tends to be, if you want to win an Oscar for Best Picture, that seems to be the most straightforward way to do it. But first, let's talk about Rogue One, which I have now seen twice in the theaters and which I quite liked. In fact, I think it's fair to say I loved it, even though I didn't think it was a very good movie. One of the things that I have done since I saw the film, I try to avoid reading any reviews. I don't want my perception to be colored by what other people think. So I guess it's worth mentioning that this is the spoiler video. You have to have seen the movie. We're going to talk about everything that happens in Rogue One. And I sort of assume that if you're somebody who follows my channel, you probably have seen Rogue One by now. I originally thought this video was going to be just a sort of a general Star Wars video in which I would talk a little bit about Rogue One, because prior to seeing it, I didn't think there was going to be that much to talk about. It looked like it was going to be a relatively straightforward movie. And so in order to fill the time, we would just talk about Star Wars and my association with it and the things I think about it. But as it turns out, after I saw the movie, I was like, no, there is definitely an entire video's worth of Rogue One stuff. I have since read a lot of criticism about it and talked to friends of mine about it who didn't like it. And the interesting thing about that is I think I agree with every criticism leveled against it. But I loved the movie in spite of those things. So that's where we stand. Did I like it? Yeah, I loved it. Did I think it was a good movie? I thought it was okay. I thought there was a much better movie in there. But we're sort of getting ahead of ourselves. I knew we were in for something new and different because there was no opening crawl. And I realized that a few moments after the movie started, I felt like I had been suddenly dumped into the Star Wars universe in a way that I hadn't ever been before because I was used to getting that opening crawl, setting everything up. I think now might be a good point in the video to sort of calibrate our sensors, because in order, I think, to understand my attitude toward a movie like Rogue One, we need to understand what I think about Star Wars in general and movies. And for me, Star Wars is filmic. It is cinematic in a way that something like Lord of the Rings is not. Lord of the Rings is always going to be a series of books for me first, regardless of what I think of those Peter Jackson movies, whether I think they were good or bad, or whether I liked them or I didn't like them. Lord of the Rings will always be these books for me, just like Star Trek will always be this TV show for me. And even though I love that first Star Trek movie and the second Star Trek movie is one of my all-time favorites, and I quite like the J.J. Abrams reboot, Star Trek will always be episodic and TV to me in a way that Star Wars is not. Star Wars is filmic. It belongs up on the big screen. I have never engaged with Star Wars outside of the movies. So friends of mine tell me, oh, you should watch Star Wars Rebels, and that sort of assumes a lot. It assumes, A, that I watch TV. I don't really watch TV. That's not a habit or a hobby that I have. And also B, that I'm interested in more Star Wars. I'm interested in more Star Wars movies, and if we continue to get one a year that are of the quality of The Force Awakens and Rogue One, I will be perfectly happy giving Disney my $20. That gives you some idea of where I fall in the spectrum of Star Wars fandom. I am a fan of Star Wars as a movie. I'm not really interested in it outside of that. And I thought Rogue One was sort of the opposite of The Force Awakens. I felt like The Force Awakens undid a lot of the work from those first movies, Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. It turns out, if we watch Force Awakens, that nothing was gained in Star Wars. The Empire wasn't destroyed, Han and Leia don't end up happy, and that if we believed that they would, that we were fools. And I felt like that kind of undoing that work is not what Star Wars is or should be about. Star Wars is a fairy tale. More than anything else, Star Wars is a fairy tale. And in fairy tales, they live happily ever after. Here in the real world, they do not. Or at least rarely do people live happily ever after in the real world. And that's one of the reasons we go to fairy tales, is to get that fantasy. So taking everything from those first movies apart, I felt a huge letdown watching The Force Awakens. Every time I was watching Finn or Rey or even Kylo Ren, who I felt was a unique. People who think they're being clever talking about The Force Awakens, saying, well, they just remade Star Wars. It's like, there is no one in that 1977 movie that is remotely similar to Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren is a complex, challenging character, and I was kind of blown away as soon as that dude took his helmet off. I knew I was in for something different watching The Force Awakens compared to any other Star Wars movie. Those characters, the new characters, all excellent. Loved all the new characters. Every time they were on screen, I was happy. And then when the old characters showed up, even though I have a lot of affection for them, I always felt let down. I felt like the tone of the movie sort of collapsed. So while The Force Awakens works very hard to undo the success of those first three movies, I feel like Rogue One elevates that first movie. It's impossible. I'm never going to be able to watch Star Wars again. And when I say Star Wars, I guess I'll put a little thing at the bottom there. When I say Star Wars, I mean that movie called Star Wars that came out in 1977. I'll never be able to watch that movie again without thinking of everything that happened in Rogue One and whatever other criticisms you may have of the film, most of which I'm probably going to agree with. To me, Gareth Edwards pulled off a minor miracle. It did something greater than J.J. Abrams did with Star Wars, in that he has successfully enriched what I think of as a fantastic American classic movie, and that's Star Wars. As much as I loved Rogue One, and I did love it, at the end of that first screening, all I wanted was just to watch Star Wars again. And I would have paid them more money to just sit there for another 2 hours and watch the torpedo fired by Galen Ursa in a blueprint launch from Luke Skywalker's X-Wing and blow up the Death Star. I thought that was brilliant. Huge failing on Disney's part that there wasn't a print of Star Wars available so we could do double features. People don't do double features anymore. Normally, I would not be interested in a double feature, but this is one instance where at 100%, I would have stayed there till 2 o'clock in the morning watching Star Wars. As much as I loved that movie, it was a bumpy ride. I remember as soon as I started to see all these little subtitles, I thought, wow, did they do that in those original movies? I don't think they did. We knew we were on Dagobah because the story was structured in such a way that when they went to Dagobah or Bespin or any number of places, we knew where we were without there having to be a subtitle across the bottom. I don't think there's anything wrong in principle with that kind of subtitling. It's classic pulp storytelling, which Star Wars is the modern inheritor of. It's the equivalent of Indiana Jones, the map with the plane flying over it from point to point. I get it, it works, but I think the reason I was so kind of taken aback by its use here in Rogue One is how often they did it. Like in the first 10 minutes of this movie, we visit 3 or 4 or 5 different worlds, some of which we spend, one scene on and then leave. So that was the first. I mean, there were a couple of things that happened in the beginning of the movie, one of which made me go, uh-oh, and the other one of which made me go, ooh. And the first one was seeing this kind of serialized storytelling where we very quickly are jumping from one world to another, and they throw up the name of it and then they move on. As a result, I don't remember any of the names of them, with maybe one exception, and many of those scenes were sort of forgettable. And the movie started to feel, and I never really lost this sense, the movie started to feel like something constructed, something cobbled together. I was seeing moments and bits from a better movie, a better story, a better script that had been chopped up and then moved around and reassembled and never given a chance to gel and smooth out. So that was one of my earliest reactions of the film. I've now seen the movie twice. I never really lost that feeling. On the flip side of that is, very early on in the film, like the second or third scene, when we meet Diego Luna's character, Captain Andor, and I loved Diego Luna in this movie. Every time he was on screen, I was happy. I thought, like Kylo Ren, Diego Luna's character, Captain Andor, is a very complex character. He's a new kind of Star Wars character, and I am ready for new kinds of Star Wars characters. That dude, in the first scene that we meet him in, he murders a dude, and that's not unusual. Star Wars, I don't know how many people think about this, but Star Wars characters are often either introduced by or established with murder. Like the first time we meet Darth Vader, it's the first thing that happens in the first Star Wars movie is Darth Vader shows up on this ship. He grabs a guy, he murders him with his bare hands. He grabs him, he lifts him off his feet and chokes him to death. He crushes his windpipe. He doesn't force choke him. He doesn't do it from a distance. He murders the dude in cold blood. And that tells us everything we need to know about what kind of movie are we in for. There's a lot of darkness and violence in Rogue One and complex points of view. And I've seen criticism that that's not really Star Wars, but fairy tales can definitely have darkness in them, and they should. I was 7 years old when I saw Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru as a charred, smoking husk, right? So, and again, Darth Vader kills a dude in that first movie the first time we see him. When we meet Han Solo, the first thing he does is he shoots a guy, murders him. When we meet, when Obi-Wan Kenobi walks into the cantina on Tatooine, he samurais a dude's arm off. Each of these instances, it's not that there was murder. It's not that there was death that is interesting. This is a known state in the Star Wars universe. Murder, life is cheap in the Star Wars universe. It's why these characters did it that establishes who they are. Darth Vader murders a dude and Han Solo murders a dude, but they both do it in very different ways, and it tells us a lot about their characters. It's the how and the why. So when Captain Andor is cornered in the middle of this bazaar and one of his allies, another member of the rebellion, is injured and can't escape, Captain Andor murders the dude, and that blew me away. And that was the first moment where I was hooked. I thought that was a really complex character. That was a well-written scene. It surprised me when he murdered the dude. I initially didn't. This tells you how effective it was, right? When a movie is working on me, I'm not conscious. The conscious rational part of my brain that analyzes things is not engaged. And that's how I felt the first time I watched this Rogue One Star Wars movie, because I didn't know who shot this dude in that alleyway. I thought it might have been a stormtrooper. And then I was like, oh, it was Captain Andor. Captain Andor murdered this guy, even though the dude was on his side. And that is crazy. He made an evaluation in a moment. He said, this guy is injured and can't get out of here, but I can. If this guy gets captured, he's going to give me up in a second. I can't take that chance. This dude has to go. And I also immediately believed that he had done things like this before. That tells you not only a lot about who Captain Andor is, but what kind of movie we are in for. And I loved that. I loved that character. I loved Diego Luna as an actor. But one failing of the film, and this is going to be the persistent theme of this video, is that even though I liked that character and I liked that actor and it was charismatic and that scene was well thought out, I had no real understanding of why Captain Andor signs up with Jyn at the end. With every character in Rogue One, we are missing a crucial scene that establishes their humanity and arguably their motivation. That would be the same thing, I think, in that instance. I've seen criticisms online that the characters don't have arcs, and I think that's just a buzzword people throw around. They don't really understand what is the purpose of a character arc. You know, Frodo doesn't have a character arc. Marty McFly doesn't have a character arc. These characters are exactly the same at the end of the film as they are at the beginning, and an ensemble, dirty dozen piece like Rogue One, the characters don't need arcs. If you go back and you watch a movie like The Magnificent Seven, which you should, the characters don't have arcs. They're the same at the end that they were at the beginning, but you get moments with each of them that humanizes them so that we believe in them, so that when they die, we feel it. It is much easier to get us to like a character than it is to get us to believe in them. To get us to like them, all you have to do is cast a likable actor and make him a funny robot with a British accent, which, by the way, I have been guilty of. But getting us to believe in them so that when they die, so that first of all, we understand their motivation. Why are they on this mission? Why does Captain Andor throw in with Jyn at the end of the film? We understand it and we believe in them. If you watch, again, The Magnificent Seven, there's a character played by Charles Bronson. Charles Bronson, not a great actor. His character doesn't have a lot to do in The Magnificent Seven, but he has this one great scene. In fact, at the risk of incurring a copyright strike, I'm going to roll it. This scene from The Magnificent Seven, which is one of my favorite movies, is everything that is wrong with Rogue One. It's everything missing from Rogue One. Stick with it. It's probably going to be, I don't know, about somewhere between 1 and 3 minutes long. Stay tuned.
Can we go with you, Bernardo?
No,
You like us, don't you?
I guess so.
You're one of us, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm one of us, all right.
Take us with you, please.
No!
We're ashamed to live here. Our fathers are cowards.
Don't you ever say that again about your fathers, because they are not cowards. You think I'm brave because I carry a gun? Well, your fathers are much braver because they carry responsibility. For you, your brothers, your sisters, and your mothers. And this responsibility is like a big rock that weighs a ton. It bends and it twists them until finally it buries them under the ground. And as nobody says they have to do this, they do it because they love you and because they want to. I have never had this kind of courage. Running a farm, working like a mule every day with no guarantee will ever come of it. This is bravery. That's why I never even started anything like that. That's why I never will.
Right? That is a great scene. That is a classic scene. And it tells us everything we need to know about Charles Bronson's character, Bernardo O'Reilly, right? His character doesn't change over the course of the movie. And when he dies, Spoilers. Obviously, we understand how the Magnificent Seven ends if I'm using it as an analogy with Rogue One. Ditto the Dirty Dozen. When his character dies, all we see is these three kids walk up to the gravestone and lay flowers on it. And that is such a moment in that film. And there is nothing like that in Rogue One. That, I think, is that feeling that it was constructed, put together, cobbled together out of a better script, and that complete absence of establishing scenes for these characters are, I think, the great criticisms of the film. They're not the only thing that is true about the movie. There are a lot of things that are true about this movie, and many of them are positive. After all, I did love it, but it is not a perfect film by any means. It is severely flawed. In my instance, in my personal case, it was more than the sum of its parts. When I say constructed and cobbled together, there were several scenes that didn't make sense to me unless I used the rational part of my brain and turned that on and went, oh, this was probably originally earlier in the film or something like, or there's a scene missing, like when Captain Andor is told to kill Galen Ursa. We understand that he's told to kill Galen Ursa because this dude is the architect of the Death Star. But Captain Andor has seen the Death Star working and knows it's finished and can blow up at least cities, if not planets. Why do we need to kill the architect right now, especially when there is a much higher ranking Imperial officer right there? Now, that being said, I really liked the scene where he decides not to because it's done without dialogue. And anytime I'm happy with a movie, anytime things happen in it without them having to explain it to us, that automatically a movie gets bonus points for me. He watches through the telescopic lens of his rifle this Imperial commander and Galen Ursa fight. He watches Galen Ursa put his life on the line to save his engineers, and he makes a moral decision not to shoot the guy. And I loved that. I thought that was exciting to watch. He decides, there's more here than meets the eye. I'm not going to kill this guy. But that whole sequence is more meaningful and more dramatic if that's all the information he has to go on. But in the movie we saw, it happens after he knows the Death Star is working, which at that point, sparing the dude's life is not that big a deal. The weapon is finished. So I felt like we were seeing a scene that belonged somewhere earlier in the movie that the writers or the directors or the producers just liked and wanted to preserve, and so kept it even though it didn't make as much sense as it would have in the original script. And also, I was baffled at what happens immediately afterwards because Captain Andor and Jyn Erso then have an argument on the ship. And from my point of view, as far as I could tell, Captain Andor won that argument. He did make a moral choice. He disobeyed orders. He did the right thing. And Jyn Erso calls him a stormtrooper for it, which made no sense to me. And then the next time we see Captain Andor, he is throwing in with Jyn Erso. He's saying, I'm on your side. They don't believe you, but I do. And I thought, why did he make that? Are we missing a scene where after he wins that argument, he has some kind of crisis of faith? Because that's what we needed and we didn't get it. But I go along with these things. I accepted them. I overlooked them because of how much I loved these characters. I loved, like I said, Diego Luna as Captain Andor. I love Donnie Yen. I've never seen Donnie Yen in a movie before, although I have a copy of Ip Man because so many of my friends recommend it, so now I have to watch it. I love Donnie Yen. Every time that dude delivered a line of dialogue, I smiled. I was happy. He was expressive. He was funny and charismatic. And more so, I believed in him and his sidekick had been through many adventures together, and I wanted to see those adventures. And if you can achieve that effect in a film, I am going to like that film. I am a sucker for getting the team together. If there's a reason that I liked Rogue One when many other of my friends and contemporaries did not, it's because it's about getting the team together, and you can do that badly and I will still like it. I'm just a huge fan of camaraderie. It's what I write about, and it's what I like to see in films. Even though I liked Donnie Yen's character, and I liked his sidekick's character, whose name I don't know, and now we're getting to the problem, right? I never understood why they signed up with Jyn Erso. It seemed, as far as I could tell, that's like, well, our city exploded, so I guess we'll just hang out with you and risk our lives on a suicide mission. I needed that scene where I understood what was in it for them, what were the stakes for them, who were they as people. I needed to believe in them instead of merely like them. I liked Donnie Yen's character, but I never really felt like I believed in him, and his sidekick was cool. I believed they had been on great adventures together, but I don't remember the guy's name. I don't know if we ever learned it. In fact, I don't remember Donnie Yen's character's name. It is said many times in the movie, but it to me was just a jumble of syllables. They got away with a lot in this movie because they cast really charismatic actors and let them have fun in the movie, and as a result, we like them a lot. The one exception to this, and the nearly fatal flaw in the movie, was Felicity Jones as Jyn Erso. I thought she was like the complete dead zone in the middle of the movie. Every time she was on screen, which is obviously most of the movie, I was a little let down. I was more interested in everyone around her. Whatever Disney saw in Felicity Jones, I did not see. However, that being said, I know a lot of people have criticized the film because they perceive her character, and this is not down to the actor, this is down to the writing, they perceive her character as randomly flip-flopping and changing her character in a moment from being a hardened, cynical criminal to being a wildly optimistic rebel fighter. And I think that is a misjudgment. I think that everything we need to know about her character is in the film. She is somebody, when we meet her, she talks about her father as if he's dead. She hopes he's dead. She would prefer it if he's dead, because better dead than a living Imperial collaborator. This relates to the theme of the film, which I know it's going to sound corny, but it's only corny because of the way they wrote it. It's not a corny idea. The theme of the film really is hope. It's a movie about hope. It's the fact that she, all her life, has been told that her father is a villain, and she hopes he's dead, but that's not true. She secretly hopes that he is alive and a hero. Meanwhile, Galen Ursa, who I thought was one of the most interesting characters in the film, of course, he's played by Mads Mikkelsen, and I love Mads Mikkelsen. I've been crazy about that guy as an actor ever since I saw him playing the only interesting character in the otherwise forgettable Clash of the Titans remake. The whole movie, I'm like, who is this guy and why isn't the whole movie about him? Meanwhile, Galen Ursa is doing exactly the same thing Jin is doing. He has to pretend that his daughter is dead, because if the Imperial officers around him get any inkling that she's alive, they'll go after her. But secretly, he hopes that she's alive, and more than that, he hopes that she doesn't believe what everyone's telling her, that she will listen to the message that he sends her and believe it. And that hope, that core central hope, him believing in her and her believing in him, is what not only drives Rogue One, it is also effectively what drives Star Wars. Nothing that happens in Star Wars now, because of Rogue One, makes sense if you don't believe in that central theme of hope in Rogue One, these two people who have been separated for 15 years believing in each other. Even when all evidence tells them, there's no evidence that she's alive, there's no evidence that her father is anything other than a villain, but they both believe. And that is the reason there is a flaw in the Death Star. Galen Urso built that flaw in the Death Star because he believed he'd be able to get a message to his daughter and that his daughter would believe him. And that blows my mind. I thought, based on the trailers, I thought Mads Mikkelsen's character was just going to be the guy who dies to motivate the hero. That's what the trailers made it look like. So when we got to that moment in his speech, and I got there only a few moments before the actual reveal in the dialogue, where I thought, oh my God, he is the reason there's the flaw in the Death Star in the first place. When he says that he built his anger at the Empire into this machine and built this flaw into it, I was completely blown away. I've seen the movie twice. It blew me away both times because it elevates everything that happens in both movies now. Like before this movie, Star Wars was a movie about these rebels who were desperate and got lucky. And they just happened to steal these plans. They had no reason to believe that there would be a flaw in the first place. Having stolen the plans, it turns out there is a baffling flaw in them. Why would they build it like this? Well, the answer is they didn't build it like this. Galen Urso built this flaw in there. It's his revenge against everything they've done to him. I thought that whole sequence, that whole idea was really well done. And because it worked on me, I loved this movie. I even liked the way he died. He has this great kind of Star Wars pulp dialogue where I think he literally says, "You'll never get away with this," to the villain of the piece. And then he has this great death sequence where he finally gets to see his daughter. She gets to see him, and he delivers what I thought was a brilliant line of dialogue. He says, "Jin, there's so much I want to tell you." And then he dies, and you know when he's saying that line of dialogue that it is his last line, that those are his dying words. And that to me is good writing and good acting. I love that. It's simple, but stuff like that is often the first casualty of a big budget production. Also, the bad guy played by Ben Mendelsohn was perfect. That guy, I thought, this is exactly what Star Wars villains should be. They should be conniving and scheming and poisoned by ambition. I love that dude. I thought not only did they write a really good Star Wars bad guy, they got an actor to play him note perfect. I wasn't 100% on Darth Vader when he first shows up, mostly because James Earl Jones's voice now does not sound like James Earl Jones's voice from 1977. It sounds old, and so that sort of let me down. But as soon as I saw Darth Vader's temple, didn't you know, as soon as you saw that building, exactly what you were in for? I was like, that is Darth Vader's house. That is amazing. I thought it was well designed, and it's one of those things, Star Wars has a problem. This is the core problem with all of Star Wars. 1977, that movie, they invented the idea of telling instead of showing. The advice you hear all the time is show, don't tell. And George Lucas says, screw it. I think I could tell you in a way that is actually better than showing you. Fast ship. You've never heard of the Millennium Falcon? I don't want to see the Kessel Run. Showing me the Kessel Run would let me down. I was let down when I saw the Senate. I was let down when I saw the Emperor in that third movie because he was just a guy. He was just a person. And no actor, no mere actor could live up to that 30-foot tall hologram we saw Darth Vader kneeling to. Right? So Star Wars is all about saying stuff and then moving on and implying this much larger world. So the fact that they actually show us Darth Vader's temple is risky because I think they've had about a 50% success rate with stuff that they've actually shown us. But I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Did you notice that it's a pyroclastic dam? That his temple sits on top of a river of lava and dams the river of lava. It controls it. It takes this burning river of rage and pain and hate and controls it. And that his temple is a metaphor for Darth Vader. I thought that was really well done. Again, I like it when they do things like that in a film and they don't tell us about it. They allow us to notice and think about it. And this was not one of those movies where everything you're supposed to think is explained to you, and that made me happy. Speaking of Darth Vader in that first movie from 1977, I was really, I was amazed, genuinely amazed at the number of things in the trailer that weren't in the film. Most of the terrible dialogue from that trailer, not in the film. Many of the scenes from the trailer, not in the film. And many of the things in the movie, not in the trailer. I had no idea that Grand Moff Tarkin was in this movie. And when I realized, oh my God, we're about to meet Grand Moff Tarkin, first of all, I had just forgotten about that character in general. So I was perfectly primed to meet him in this film. And I thought, like you, I thought, it's just going to be the back of his head and his voice, right? And then when he turns around and we see him reflected in the glass for a sec, I'm like, okay, that's how they're going to do it. No, he turns around and he looks at us and he talks, and he doesn't just talk, he has a lot of dialogue. I was like, holy crap. And I was blown away by that decision. But in an instant, my first reaction was what an artistically ballsy decision it was, because it had to be something they decided they were going to do very early in production, not knowing, is this going to work? And I love it. That is a creative, artistic decision. That is not a cynical, a corporate decision. That is one of those things where they're like, gosh, wouldn't it be awesome to have Grand Moff Tarkin in this movie? How are we going to do it? They could have just recast him, and maybe that would have been a better idea. That's what they did with Mon Mothma, but he has way more dialogue, and he has a much greater presence in this film than Mon Mothma does. So they went for it, and it mostly works. It doesn't really work. It doesn't really work. It didn't offend me. It didn't ruin the movie for me, but I never believed that was Grand Moff Tarkin. I felt like he was in there somewhere, and I was watching him being inexpertly translated out. I never felt like I was watching an actor performing or a character being. I always felt like I was watching animators animating. Every time he arched an eyebrow or glowered at somebody, I always felt like it was an overly studied, methodical. I was watching the decisions animators were making instead of someone just being, and I never escaped that feeling. My hat goes off to those guys for trying it, because you have to try it and you have to fail at it a couple of times before you knock it out of the park eventually, and people just get used to it. And the astonishing thing is, I know many people who said they did not know that was a CG character. They thought that was an actor, and that sort of blows my mind a little bit. But it just reminds me that people watch movies in wildly different ways. We talked about things in the trailer that weren't in the movie. I'm about 80% certain that this is the pilot played by Riz Ahmed's character in that TIE fighter, because he's the pilot, right? So this is the Bishop scene. People called it out when it was in the trailer. They're like, so this is that scene from Aliens, right? But I don't think we knew then how true that was. I think this really is Jyn Erso thinking she's about to get in a fight. She's going to have a showdown with a TIE fighter using only her pistol, which tells us what a badass character she is. But it's going to turn out that this is Bishop, aka the pilot, Riz Ahmed, in this ship. Because of course, that's his job. What kind of death did that character get? He died in an explosion, which is sort of like dying off screen after. What did he do for most of the movie? At that third act, he spent most of his time telling other people what to do, talking on the phone, and trying to get like a plug unstuck from the carpet. I thought this is a very ignominious death for this character. Again, even though I really liked Riz Ahmed in this role, I think he's a very charismatic actor. I liked it when he was on screen. I did not believe in his character because we never get that moment where he talks about, they don't have to show us, they just have to tell us in an interesting way. They never tell us, what did he do that caused Galen Ursa to give him the message? He trusted this dude with the message, even though this guy had done something awful apart from just being in the Empire, because he quotes Galen Ursa saying, this is your chance to make things right. Well, what had gone wrong? And why did Galen Ursa believe in this guy? We needed that moment. We needed that scene. And I would have liked to see him save the day in a more interesting way. I thought that whole thing with transmitting the plans was overly thought out, had too many steps in it, and I felt like we were seeing one plan, and then the writers said, no, we need to pull it out and add some more steps in here to give some of these characters an opportunity to die dramatically. And that, again, like I said, this feeling of the movie being cobbled together, constructed. It didn't feel natural. It didn't flow naturally. I didn't believe in the council scene where they all debate what to do about what Jyn Erso and Captain Andor has told them, because we all know going into it that they're going to fight. They're not going to agree. She is going to get upset at their lack of action and storm out and take matters into her own hands. We all know that's coming, so we forgive that scene for not really working very well. It felt like they were going through the motions and just checking things off and saying, okay, we did this, we did that, we're done. It didn't feel earned. I didn't believe, like, Captain Andor was there on Jedha, the one place, the name of which I remember from this movie. He was there on Jedha when the Death Star obliterated this place. He should have been in that scene saying, guys, the Death Star is real. I saw it. But they're acting like it's a fantasy. Half the people in that meeting seem to believe there's a Death Star and therefore we should just quit being a rebellion. And the other half act like that. One of them literally says the Death Star, that's ridiculous. And I was like, this scene doesn't make any sense. This drama is false. I think there was a better scene there, a better opportunity for drama that we would believe in, and we missed it. I love the way the bad guy played by Ben Mendelsohn, whose name I don't remember. I love the way that guy died. He died in such a Greek tragic way, killed by if Star Wars is about anything, and it is, it's about how technology is the opposite of humanity. Everything good in Star Wars comes from trusting the Force, comes from trusting your humanity, comes in trusting people. Everything bad in Star Wars comes from relying on technology. If they want to tell us a character is bad, they make him look technological or make him literally technological.
He's more machine now than man.
So watching this character killed by the machine he devoted his life to, watching the Death Star bearing down on him, looking like nothing more than a giant eye in a way that the Death Star always could have, but never has before, blew me away. I loved it. There was no dialogue explaining it. He just looks up. He doesn't even say anything, but it's left up to us to feel this incredible irony that this is how the dude was murdered. I loved seeing the Rebel fleet show up, but like the council scene, like a lot of other scenes in this film, I thought there was a better way to do this. I didn't really understand why they were flying around and throwing themselves at this shield for no reason when there's a device projecting this shield. That shield around that planet was not a natural phenomenon. And they made it worse by showing us the rebels using these ion torpedoes, which were awesome, against a Star Destroyer, disabling the Star Destroyer. The first time I saw the movie, when I saw that happen, I thought, why didn't they use that on the little ring thing that's projecting the shield? If they can disable a Star Destroyer, which is this huge giant ship, why can't they disable this projector thing? It did not pass the refrigerator test, as Alfred Hitchcock put it. Alfred Hitchcock said, when you're watching a movie and you come out of the movie and you think that was awesome, and then you go home at night and you go to sleep and you wake up in the middle of the night and you're thirsty and you go to the fridge and you open the refrigerator and you're looking to see, do I want milk? Do I want water? And you think, wait a minute, that one thing that happened in the movie didn't make any sense. He said, I win. My movie passed the test. The fact that it didn't make sense later, after the fact, is not the point. It worked while you were watching it. Steven Spielberg said the same thing when he was filming Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and he has the mothership come up over Devil's Tower, and all the special effects guys on the movies were like, Steven, that doesn't make any sense. This mothership is many times larger than Devil's Tower. Where was it? Was it buried under the ground? Where was it hiding? And Steven Spielberg said, if they've gone with me this far, I've got them by the balls, and they will accept whatever I put in front of them. And that is true. And Rogue One did not have me by the balls, so to speak. So when they put this battles in front of me, this giant rebel fleet and X-Wings and TIE fighters flying around, which I like, I didn't believe in it because it didn't make any sense. And then I did like the Hammerhead Corvette. I thought that was a cool idea. I'd never seen that before, slamming into this disabled Star Destroyer and angling it down and smashing it into this the shield projector, and that thereby turning off the shield. But I remember thinking as I was watching this, I thought, A, this is cool. B, have we ever seen a Star Destroyer do anything in Star Wars other than end up crashing into another Star Destroyer or crashing into something like the Death Star? It seems like that's the job of Star Destroyers. Ever since, I think the first thing it did in that first movie was a Death Star captured that escaping Corvette. That's cool. Ever since then, it seems like they just shoot ineffectively at X-Wings and then crash into each other. So yeah, I think there was a better scene there. But then again, I forgive that flaw, because that whole sequence, everything that happens after Captain Andor and Jyn Ersa embrace on the beach, everything that happened, I thought that was the end of the movie. I thought that was it. We're going to roll credits, right? No, the movie kept going and it kept going. And the longer it kept going, the more amazed I was. I had no idea this was the ending of Rogue One. I had no idea that Rogue One was just going to keep rolling and go right up to the edge of Star Wars. I was exhilarated. I was thrilled. It was amazing. Whatever sins the movie had, I forgave them because of this. The movie really has a lot of reasons to forgive it. Diego Luna's character, Captain Andor, and how we meet him and how morally ambiguous he is. The success of the idea that Galen Ursa, in his revenge against the Empire, was building this flaw into the Death Star. I thought that was brilliant. And then we get this ending scene at the with Darth Vader murdering his way across the Rebel fleet. I thought that was unbelievable. I knew while I was watching it that I had this sense of Gareth Edwards' awareness that this may be the only chance we have to see Darth Vader in film being the badass dude we all have known he could be and kind of expected him to be. So it didn't take much really of him just walking down this corridor, slaughtering people while they're desperately trying to get the plans. The plans are always inches away from him. And I thought that was brilliant. And that's the reason that at the end of that movie, I just wanted to watch Star Wars. And in fact, the second time I saw it, I immediately came home and rolled Star Wars. And it does, Rogue One genuinely elevates everything that happens in that first movie. And it works a lot better than you might hope. I was sort of baffled by the presence of Ghost Dog, Forrest Whitaker, in this movie, even though I really liked him. And again, like Ben Mendelsohn playing the bad guy, I thought Forrest Whitaker played a Star Wars character brilliantly. He knew how to act in a Star Wars movie. It was fantastic. But they tell us a lot about this dude, but not in what I would consider a successful way. They just say that he's too extreme for us. And that's a very sophisticated political notion. The idea that we're not terrorists, we're freedom fighters. That guy is a terrorist and we're not with him. That's the kind of thing the people willing to negotiate say about the people unwilling to negotiate. But the rebellion is definitely not willing to negotiate with the Empire. So that whole idea didn't make any sense to me. Again, I needed to know more about Saw Gerrera. I remember that guy's character, his name. I needed to know more about Saw Gerrera so I would understand, why are they saying the things they're saying about him? Why are they treating him different than everybody else? And they could have done it with dialogue. They could have told us instead of showing us. And if they told us the right way, I would have been perfectly happy. But instead, he felt kind of superfluous to the whole thing. He felt like a key. He felt like a device that unlocked the rest of the movie. I thought the cameos were pretty superfluous and we could have done without them, and no one would have noticed. No one would have thought less of the movie if we didn't meet the two criminals from the cantina from Tatooine. They added maybe a little bit to the scene that they were in because they established that this place is a dangerous place. This bazaar on Jeddah that they're in is a dangerous place because it has characters like this in it. But if you had taken them out, would anyone have noticed or cared? And then C-3PO and R2-D2 show up in a scene later on, and I really thought that was distracting. I thought, why? The only reason these things are in here, the only reason those two criminals are in there, the only reason R2-D2 and C-3PO are in there is because the movie wanted to show us it was a Star Wars movie instead of just relaxing and being a Star Wars movie. And the opportunity was there for it to just be a Star Wars movie. They did a lot of work to make Rogue One look and feel like a Star Wars movie in a way that no other movie has since 1977. Reminding us that it's a Star Wars movie was an unnecessary distraction. And if you go online and you read, there was a featurette that they made before the movie came out that they showed us on YouTube, talking about how they shot that scene in Jeddah and about how they built the set in 360 degrees. If you don't know how a movie is shot or a TV show, it's basically shot like a play where there's one wall that the audience sees, another wall the audience sees, another wall the audience sees, and they put the camera here so there's no fourth wall. That's why when a character looks at the camera and talks directly to the camera in a movie, they call it breaking the fourth wall, because the audience imagines that there's a fourth wall there. But I think Gareth Edwards was just crazy in love with practical effects movies specifically like Alien from 1979, where Ridley Scott really did build those sets in 360 degrees, but he needed to do that because he cast these very different actors. Some of them, they were very different backgrounds. They were theater actors and TV actors and movie actors, and he stuck them all together, and he wanted to ratchet up the tension. He wanted the actors to believe in the environment they were in, so he built the environment they were in, and then he could put his camera anywhere and get the actors' reactions. And that's the reason those scenes in Alien have that tension. The actors had never seen a set like that before, and to my way of thinking, that is evident on the screen. The work Ridley Scott did building those sets is all there on the screen in Alien, whereas the work Gareth Edwards did building this bazaar, and then he had all of the members of the production team all had to be in costume while they were shooting, so in case they accidentally ended up on screen, they would just be able to keep shooting. He had the background artists who normally would be choreographed. Okay, when this actor walks this way, you come out of your stall and walk over here and go here. He had them instead just role play doing their jobs, and he felt like that allowed them to move through that space in an organic way and shoot what they wanted to shoot. But to me, It just looked like any other movie. I didn't get any sense of the benefit of that. It seemed like a lot of work put into something that didn't matter. It reminds me of Sunshine, which is an otherwise forgettable film by the brilliant director Danny Boyle. He had the actors in Sunshine spend, I think I read that it was like 18 months learning their characters' scientific disciplines. And that's a ridiculous amount of work to do, considering none of that's on screen. They just seem like actors acting. So I wasn't a huge fan of the cameos. I feel like the way the movie was shot is kind of weird and ineffective, but I'll tell you that as much, I like the fact that Jimmy Smits was in it. I thought that was cool because I just think that dude's a charismatic, interesting actor. I want to know more about him. And the thing I missed and I wanted, but maybe I shouldn't have gotten, I wanted to see Captain Antilles. I think Captain Antilles is a great legendary character from the Star Wars universe. Again, I don't follow the extended universe, so maybe he's in the comics or the novels. But I've always imagined him as this classic swashbuckling character, and I would have loved to see him, especially in a cameo in this movie. There's a bit in the original Star Wars, in the opening of it, the first line of dialogue, C-3PO says, "There'll be no escape for the princess this time." And that line of dialogue, by the way, doesn't make any sense. Because later on, when we see C-3PO looking at the hologram of Princess Leia, he's like, I have no idea who this is, and I believe him. And if you go look at the original script for Star Wars, C-3PO's line was, "There'll be no escape for Captain Antilles this time." That is a better line because they are Captain Antilles robots, and it gives you the idea, the impression, which is what George Lucas was going after, of this out of the frying pan into the fire pulp storytelling where there's a much larger story that most of which is happening off screen, and you showed up in the middle of it. We'll talk more about that in the Star Wars video, but that line that we're missing, "There'll be no escape for Captain Antilles this time," I love that character. I wanted to see him in the movie, and they could have got a big famous actor. I think that would have been appropriate. That would have been one of those instances where having a big famous actor come out and just be Captain Antilles for one or two lines of dialogue so that we think, oh, he's going to go have adventures, we want to go follow him. That would have been really effective, I think. Or it might have ended up being like showing me the Emperor in that third movie where I'm like, oh, it's just a guy in a rubber mask. And who would they get to play Captain Antilles? Wouldn't it just be weird for them to go grab Matt Damon, whose job it seems to be to do these things, and then we'd be like, why is Matt Damon in this movie? Although now that I think about it, Matt Damon would be an awesome Captain Antilles, right? Putting somebody like Matt Damon in that outfit with like a cape and a blaster and telling us that he's the captain of this rebel ship, we'd be like, man, I want to go on adventures with that guy. And that is what Star Wars does when it is at its best. It is informing a larger world. And that's, I think, what Rogue One succeeded at. It informs everything that happens in Star Wars. Ultimately, the reaction that we have when we see a movie has very little to do, I think, with where it ends up settling in the culture. It's going to take some time before we are able to look back and see, was Rogue One a success? Does it sit in the canon and inform that first movie the way I think it does? Because I certainly will not be able to watch Star Wars again without thinking of everything that happened in Rogue One, and that is a momentous achievement, I think. Easy to try to do something like that and fail. Like I said before, I love Star Wars. I would be happy if, as long as they continue to be of this quality, I'll be very happy if we continue to get a Star Wars movie every year, especially because we get other movies like The Nice Guys and The Lobster and La La Land. As long as we continue to get interesting little movies like that, I'm perfectly happy for our big budget movies to be stuff like Rogue One and The Force Awakens. But I think that while at the same time really wishing that my parents' generation, the baby boomers, had gotten out of the way and let my generation and subsequent generations do their own thing, I would have much preferred, as much as I like Rogue One, I would have much preferred to see Mads Mikkelsen as the dashing leading man in a new original space opera. I wish my generation, of which I think Gareth Edwards belongs, did not spend so much of our time picking through the cultural wreckage of an earlier generation, trying to find any little bit of scrap that still has some fire in it. A whole movie based on one line of text from the opening crawl from another movie. I loved Rogue One, but I did think there was a better movie in there. I think that if we're going to spend our time digging through our parents' old notebooks and playing with their old toys instead of making our own, we could do a lot worse than Rogue One. That was the Rogue One video, folks. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. We're going to do more movie videos interspersed among the D&D stuff. Don't worry. I owe you guys a couple of 2001 videos. Legendary Entertainment got the rights to do Dune. And they have the rights to do TV shows or movies. And so, of course, there are people online talking about how it should be an HBO miniseries. They could do that. They could do a trilogy of movies. That first book actually breaks into 3 sections with section headers. So they could do that. But the question arises, could you make Dune a single movie? And of course, there are people watching this video shouting, no, but I think you probably could. So I think there may be an interesting video talking about how to do Dune as a movie, and also just my history with that property. I have an interesting history with Dune. I've worked on, I got started in the game industry as a designer working on Dune games. officially licensed Dune products. And so I know that property. I have a familiarity and experience with that property beyond just the fact that it was my favorite book for many years and I read it every year. And we'll do a Blade Runner video because there's a sequel to Blade Runner and I love that first movie and I've written a lot about it online. So I think we have some stuff to talk about. And we got a new Prometheus sequel trailer, and I'm one of the few people that genuinely loved Prometheus. I was ready for Ridley Scott's new science fiction movie, so I wasn't disappointed when I didn't get Ridley Scott's new Alien movie. I think that's the core difference between my attitude toward Prometheus and most people's. But I've written a lot about Prometheus online, and I'd be happy to do a video talking about what I thought was going on in that film. Let me know what you thought about Rogue One. Again, I'm not super interested in whether people agree or disagree with me. I think that is a red herring. Those of us who review films, we do it because we love movies and we love talking about them. So let's talk about them. Saying I agree, I disagree, I think is a distraction. Let me know what you thought. That's what I'm interested in. Meanwhile, there will be more D&D videos. Until next time, may the Force be with you.